All right, y'all. Welcome to another review of McMillan Presents the sequel Tempted to Love that premiered on Lifetime Saturday, January 31st, at 8 p.m. I've been having issues with TikTok glitching, so I'm a little behind on these updates. Y'all keep up with me. Starring Garcelle Bouvet, Vaughn W. Hebron as the lead, Leon Rashawn, Leela Rashawn as her best friend Dina, and Boris Kojo as her new man, her love, Ellis. All right, let's talk about it. A star chef heads to Portugal for a major culinary event with her new love, that's Ellis, only to find her much younger ex is there too. As they work side by side with their current partners, old feelings resurface, challenging their hearts and careers. All right, let's get right into this review. And right now, this is set in Beaufort, South Carolina. That's where Ava, aka Garcelle Bouvet, is currently living. Again, Ava Dennis is played by Garcelle Bouvet. Her man, Ellis Wilkinson. Ellis Wilkinson, is played by Boris Kojo. I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. Because this movie was a little bit slower, and of course it was predictable. If you've seen, sorry, whenever I wipe my nose, I disappear. If you have seen the first movie. Let's get right into it. And so Mindy, one of her her head chefs, walks in and says, "Hey boss, do you have a minute?" Ava answers, "Yes, I was trying to get to the kitchen to see you, but it's been crazy busy." And Mindy says, "Two of my line cooks still aren't getting along. Alpha males, do you think you could talk to them?" Ava says, "Yeah, but we need to go over the fall menu." And Mindy says, "That's what I want to talk to you about." And Ava said, "I'm glad we're on the same page. Growing up, my mom used to make soup jumu. It's a Haitian pumpkin soup." And then Ava gets interrupted by a phone call, and then she says, "Where were we?" And so Mindy answers, "I was hoping to take a more active role since you're in here and I'm on the ground, closer to the new trends and techniques." And so she hands Ava a menu. She says, "Here's the menu, and here's the menu ideas." And Ava answered, "They're French leaning." And Mindy said, "I graduated from the Randy Paris. Of course, you did too. I want the chance to showcase what I've learned." And so Ava said, "I love creating menus for all our properties." This is, talking about her job in the Charleston Stop Hotel chain. And she said, "It's also my favorite part of being a chef. It's my favorite part of being a chef, and it's the best part of the gig, which is the job." She said, "I wouldn't want to deprive you of that." And Mindy said, "I'll have a tasting ready for you when you return back from Portugal. And since it's your kitchen," Ava replied, "I look forward to hearing you settle your line cook issues." And she smiled at her like she was not pleased that she has to handle it. And so Dina ends up meeting Ava for drinks at her job. Dina said, she said to her, like, I think it would be easier just meeting up with you here." And so Dina asked her, "Did you hear anything from Luke?" And Ava replied, "I got a congratulatory text about the Gastro Gala event a few weeks back. That's the event she's going to in Portugal." And Dina said, "Paris is close to Portugal. Will you pop over?" And Ava said, "I'm not worried about my ex's future. I don't even know what to do with mine." And then they started talking about, Dina spoke about her dreams of owning her own restaurant. And so Ava says, "There's a clause in my contract that says I can't own my own restaurant for 5 years." And so Ava prepares a menu on and then they talk about her possibly owning a restaurant in New York. And Ava says, it's very important, I have to write it down. Ava says that she cannot, even own a restaurant in New York because of this clause. She cannot own her restaurant for 5 years. The clause with the Charles Stop Hotel, in which she is the CEC, which is the from the previous movie, like she is the chief executive chef in charge, something around of that nature. And so we see Ava is preparing a menu on the private jet with her boyfriend Ellis for the Gastro Gala. And the menu is Haitian, which is an ode to Garcelle Bouvet in real life, because she is a Haitian American actress. She came here really young. She was first a model at 18, and then she began acting. Y'all may know her from her role as Fancy on the Jamie Foxx show. Let's continue. And I really put down here in the notes how representation matters. So on the menu, I had to pause and read it because it was so important. It was soup jumu, which is a pumpkin soup. It's freedom soup for those of you who don't know the lesson. Every first of the year, Haitians drink this freedom soup to celebrate our freedom as the first Black republic and one of the original Latin countries. And so the soup jumu is made of pumpkin, beef, potatoes, cabbage, pasta, herbs, and spices. And then riz à pois, which for those of you who don't know is rice and beans with garlic, onions, herbs, and spices. Then guillo, which is marinated fried pork with citrus, garlic, peppers, and spices. And Ava says, thank you for all of this to Private Plane. Ava appreciates Ellis, that's her man, played by Boris Korjo, missing her son's game to support her. I didn't really like that. I think it's important to prioritize their kids, but let's continue. And now they are at the gastro event, and they're walking down the stairs, and Ellis said, break it down for me again. And Ava said, the International Gastro Gala raises scholarship scholarships funds for culinary students. She said during the day there's cooking classes and product launches, and she's going to be looking for her sous chef as part of the competition. Ava tells Karen, her friend, that she met Ellis in New York because she was asking. And while she was checking, okay, so Ava tells her friend Karen, who is one of the judges in the competition, by the way, part of the board, that she met Ellis in New York while she was checking on properties. He came in for dinner, and they've been long distance ever since, because as you guys know, she lives in Beaufort, South Carolina. And so Ava ends up meeting Lily, an influencer, in the bathroom. Ellis introduces Luke to Ava, and they were both shocked to run into each other, and they were glancing at each other from across the room. And Luke says, you look beautiful. And Ava's like, don't do that. And Luke says, the chef who was originally invited got a job and started right away. I found out that I was coming yesterday. I've been scrambling ever since. And, Ava's like, didn't we decide to, have minimum contact? And then Luke is like, you decided to stop talking to me. So, he couldn't have given her a heads up. So that's basically what that conversation was about. And Ava says, Lily seems lovely, talking about his new girl. And Luke answered, she is. And so we are back in Ellis's and Ava's room. And Ellis is like, BRB, because they're talking about, they're young and, millennials and, they're, how do you call these words again? The abbreviations that they used, you know what I mean? And Ellis is like, BRB. Ava's like, I know that one. That means be right back. And so then Ellis says, OH, RHO, RHB, RHOBH, which I find hilarious because if you guys know what RHOBH is, Garcelle Beauvais was previously part of the cast of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. I like that the movie sprinkled parts of Garcelle Beauvais' real life. Let's continue. And Ava decided to go out the next morning exploring, and she's on the phone with Dina. She said, and Dina asked, was it weird seeing Luke again? And she said, 33, fine as hell with worldly experience. Because remember when they met, he was 31. That was back in 2024. It's 2 years later. He's now 33 when this movie was released in 2026, right? She said, he's 33, fine as hell with worldly experience. He has a girlfriend, Lily. And, Dina was like kind of like making things, thinking like he's into snow bunnies, aka white girls, if you know, you know. And so Ava was saying, no, she's a British Nigerian like Sade. And Ava continued to talk about how she's 50 plus and her hand works 70% of the time. So that tells me that her RA or her rheumatoid arthritis has advanced since the first movie. And Ava asked her how was drinks, because the night that she left her with drinks. And Dina said that he was a businessman and he knew how to handle business. If you know, you know. Turns out I think Dina got some. If you know, you know. All right. So Luke and Ava ran into each other at the market the next morning. And so they're catching up about Luke's time in France. And Ava said, we should take separate cars after they're done exploring so that we don't seem too friendly because of the competition. And so Luke is competing to be the sous chef, and Garcelle is the head chef and instructor for that competition. Right now, they are in Portugal, just a reminder. And so one of the chefs asks, yes, there's a position in London that you can win after this competition with a 50,000 euro cash prize. And Ava said, the final four, we're down to the final four, and now they have to make a meal with three. They have to make a meal with three ingredients. And Luke made a red truffle Gruyere, truffle Gruyere with butter. And one chef made a rough biscuit and was eliminated because of it. One of the only things I wanted to point out to, one chef ended up, she said you can make anything that makes you happy. She ended up making a lemonade with three ingredients. So it was lemon, sugar. No, it was lemon, water, and some lavender. And one of the chefs made a rough biscuit and ended up getting eliminated. Come back for part 2 so we can finish this review. And so let's pick up where we left off. At this point, we see that Garcelle has gone to the golf course to go meet up with Ellis, who had a tea time earlier that morning. And so Ellis said, did you find your backup QB? Because he is a pro football player. yet, which is basically his way of saying, did you find your sous chef? And she said, we're down to the final three with Luke being one of them. If he gets this, there's going to be a job waiting for him in London. And Ellis basically was asking, how is he doing in the competition? And she's like, she feels a little type of way about it because she's like, if he wins, I wouldn't want people to think because of our past that I favor him. And if he doesn't win, I don't want people to think he's untalented either. And so Ellis says, are you going to tell me that you have feelings for him? And Ava says, of course not. I have a favor to act. And so Ellis ends up, that next day we see them together. Ellis ends up telling Luke that he is now part of the committee because Ellis said he believes in transparency. That Karen, who is part of the committee, part of the board, said that they like a celebrity factor. And Ellis continues saying that he didn't know that Europeans liked American football. And so Ellis wishes Luke luck in the competition. Luke wins the competition with a triangle seafood crepe. I'm not sure what that is, but that's some fancy culinary school. And so Lily and Luke joins Ellis and Ava for dinner. So Ellis and Ava were there first. And, of course, her man Ellis, played by Boris Kodjoe, was open. He's like, just invite them over. And so, he felt very awkward about it. But Luke came over to the table with his, girl, his girl Lily. And so Lily said, I tagged you guys in her making of a sous chef post. And Ellis said, my son is my social media manager. He'll be glad that Pops is trending. They enjoyed a wine tasting followed by a drinking game of Never Have I Ever. And so Lily commented that, her podcast is fire. And he's like, and so Ellis replies, what episode did you listen to? She meant, no, the podcast is fire because it's going viral. And so Ellis continues, no. And so during the night, at that point, they're all getting a little bit drunk. And so Ellis invites Luke to do his podcast, and Ava agrees to let Lily run her social media. And they both, and Ava and Ellis wake up in their room the next day drunk, regretting what they did the night before. And Luke and Ava are in the kitchen prepping for an upcoming event for the competition. And Luke ends up meeting up with Ellis for the podcast. And so this is me as Ellis, played by Boris Kodjoe. Welcome to 11 Minutes with Ellis, where athletes don't retire, they inspire. And then we go to Lily and Ava, who meet up to discuss the social media branding. And she's like the C-suite, because she works in the C-suite. And if we go back to when she was having drinks with Dina back in the restaurant that she works for as the CEC for the Charles Stop hotel chain, Dina was able to get free drinks that night because it's covered for her working on the C-suite. And she's like, how about, C-suite is one of the branding ideas. Then she said, how about Love Me As I Am, which I love, again, like Garcelle Bouvet's real life is seeped into the book, seeped into the movie. And of course, the Haitian representation, I enjoyed that very much. And she said, Love Me As I Am, which I love that because that is the title of Garcelle's memoir. It's actually on my Audible. I have to listen to it. And then what she came up with, Lily came up with, come for the food, stay for the chef. And they both agreed that, that's great. They like that. And we're back on a podcast where Luke shares with Ellis how he tore his ACL and lost his football career. And so here he says, a few years ago, my mom got cancer. This is a repeat of the first movie. He's telling a story. She's good now, but during chemo, she wasn't eating. And because she wasn't eating, my dad wasn't eating either. So I had to mess around in the kitchen and I discovered I really liked it. And Ellis said, yes, family support is key. And we see Ava is back talking to Karen and is back talking to Lily. And so she says, Karen, she's the head of the committee and, a friend of Ava, thinks that the social media post did help her sell out the event. And Lily said, do you regret dumping Luke? And Ava replies, I didn't dump Luke. I set him free. And Lily said, I couldn't do it. And she said that love is doing the right thing even when it hurts. And Luke, now we're back on the podcast, and Luke says, can I ask you a question? And Ellis is like, yeah, go ahead. And he says, with all the success and Super Bowl rings and private plane, would you do anything differently? And Ellis answered, to be more present with my children and to be wherever she is, which is Ava. And he kind of looks at her suspectingly, and then the music kind of crescendos, kind of make it seem like the boys are low-key competing for Ava, which I love. Music is a very important part of the movie. It just makes you feel something. And Ava was up cooking because she couldn't sleep. And Ellis wakes up to a note from Ava saying, "Can't sleep, getting a jump on the private dinner, A." And so Luke is talking to Ava, and this is when they return back from commercial. And Luke says, "Second best night of my life." I'm not sure what they were talking about because that part was cut out. We didn't see. And so Ava says, "If that was the second best night of your life, what was your first?" And Luke said, "The rooftop, the night you showed me all of this was possible, the night of our first date, the night of our first kiss. Uh, no, the night." Okay, let me read that over. Luke answers at the rooftop. "The night you showed me all of this was possible, his culinary dreams. The night of our first date, the night of our first dance, the night of our first kiss." Ellis catches them in the kitchen together, and they were in a very intimate position. He was leading into her, kind of like almost like they were going to kiss. And so Ava said, "Luke, we can't do this." And Luke says, "I know, but it doesn't stop me from wanting to." Ooh, he's yearning. I love it. And Ava goes back to her room. And Ava says, it's too early for golf because she sees that, Ellis is packing up. And Ellis answers, "I'm headed to the airport. The car should be here in a minute. Might as well catch my son's game." And Ava says, "What's going on?" Ellis says, "I saw you two. I could have sworn I asked you if you still had feelings for him." Ava said, "I answered truthfully at the time." And Ellis replies, "At the time?" Ava says, "But Ellis, nothing happened." And Ellis says, "I saw the way you were looking at him." Ava said, "This isn't about Luke. This is about me and you." Ellis replied, "Me and you?" And he says, "Okay, I'm listening." Ava says, and then Ava replies, "It's not enough that we're well suited or that you have bad knees to match my bad hands. We both deserve more than that. I don't want to be in a relationship because it makes sense. I want indescribable." And Ellis says, "And with me, how do you feel?" And Ava says, "Safe." Ellis said, "Is that a bad thing?" Ellis answers, "Is that bad?" Ava said, "No, it's a beautiful thing. It's just not what I need. Not not right now. Life's too short. And the last thing I want is to hurt you. But I can't afford to play it safe anymore. Not in work and not in love." Ooh, that's so powerful. You better say that, Ava, aka Garcelle Bouvet. And so Ellis says, "I was the one who put the ball on the tee," another sports analogy. "I didn't know that you were going to miss that bad." And Ava apologizes, and Ellis says, "Me too," like he's sorry as well. And he tells her, "Good luck tonight, and I know that your mom will be smiling down above at you," because, Ava's mom passed. And as you remember, Aunt Judy from the first movie is Ava's mom's sister. And Luke said, what the hell am I doing?" He's up at night in the bed, like contemplating what's going on, like contemplating his decisions based on love, you know what I'm saying? And Lily and Luke go for a run, and Luke said, "Lily, we need to talk." And Lily said, "Yeah, I know. Y'all already know what's going to happen, but I'm not going to spoil it for you." And so at this point, the chefs prepare for the private dinner, and the lights go out, and they have to use candle, but then the power comes back on. And so Garcelle prepared pate cod, which is usually made with beef or chicken, but she decided to make it with cabbage and um, chopped scallions. And so the judges, do their thing, and Ava ends up winning the competition. Chef Ava Dennis won. Yay, that's what I have in my notes. And so I have a question for you guys as the audience. Will Ava play it safe, or will she go back to Luke? At the end of the first movie, they did she set him free, and they said, it is said, if you love someone, let them go and see if they return to you. Will Ava play it safe, or will she get back with Luke again? Tempted to Love, Terry McMillan Presents the sequel, Tempted by Love, is now streaming on the Lifetime app, no login required, and on Philo or the Frdnly app. Check it out, y'all. Thank you for tuning into my review. I'll be back tomorrow with some more reviews, and stay tuned for a pod episode Thursday, and a bonus episode on Friday where we're going to talk perimenopause and menopause. Have a great night. Peace.